Hey everybody, you guys ready? A lot of data. Throw a lot of data at you, it's gonna be fun, I promise. So my name is Nick Toman. I head up the sales practice at CEB. Hopefully a lot of you have heard of CEB. You've probably heard of some of our work around the challenger customer, or more namely, the challenger sale. And I'm gonna give us just kind of a quick baseline because what we're gonna do today is a little different. Normally, we love to come up on stage and talk about sales and marketing effectiveness and what drives sales and marketing effectiveness and what we need to be doing with our content strategies. We're gonna get to some of that, I promise, but we're gonna start with the customer. And it's really kind of an interesting thing to start with the customer because we all talk about customer centricity, we focus on it so much in our businesses, but you don't see many books written about customer buying behavior. You don't see many studies done on customer buying behavior. And when we set out to do this research and publish the Challenger Customer, we were trying to look specifically at how can customers buy better? How can they make better decisions? How can they do the right thing for their business and forge good consensus around decisions they make when buying complex things? And that's what led us down the path of this character we call the Challenger Customer. I'll get to that character in just a bit here. But the Challenger Customer in many ways is akin to the whole idea of the Challenger sale. And many of you will know that, but for those who don't, we did research, gosh, now about 8 years ago, believe it or not, where we found the best salespeople challenge how their customers think about their business. They instigate change inside that customer's business, and the content strategies that support them, all in your hands here from a marketing standpoint, are imperative to help drive that change in the customer business. Well, similarly, what we found on the customer side is that there's people inside the customer organization who are equally good at compelling and driving that change. And we've got to really make sure that our messages, our content, our sales efforts reach out and they instigate that person in the right direction. So since we're going to go on a bit of a customer journey, let's start with the typical buying journey. Now, I must admit, this graphic overly simplifies everything about customer buying. In fact, if I tried to draw it on a page, it'd be a bunch of squiggly lines running here, there, and everywhere. But I'm a simple guy, I like simple graphics. It doesn't get more simple than this. 3 boxes that describe any customer purchase. So there we are in the lower left. Status quo, business as usual, the customer is operating under normal circumstances. Now at some point, a stakeholder or a small group of stakeholders get an idea. Perhaps they read some of your content. Perhaps they met with a sales rep. More likely, they were probably reading something online, maybe at a conference, who knows? But they got that idea. And that idea made so much sense to them. They brought their team together, they said, guys, we've got to do this. We've got to take this course of action. This makes so much sense, and they agree on this initial vision, that second box. And this is a point where we kind of celebrate for our efforts from a content standpoint, right? We got them to agree on this vision. We got them to admit there's a better way forward. And from a sales standpoint, our sales reps get involved at this point, get all fired up. They start committing resources. We dump all of our subject matter experts on a bus. We show up at the customer site. We're going to commit to this deal. We're going to have it in 2 weeks' time. And everybody's fired up, right? The customer has agreed on a vision. And then what happens? Weeks go by. Months go by. In some cases, years go by, and nothing happens. We call that second movement there, that agreement on vision all the way to the final purchase decision, we call that the solutions graveyard, because this is where good deals go to die. Why is that? Well, if you look at the top of the screen, it kind of sheds light on what's happening here. As we see a single stakeholder, perhaps a small group of stakeholders inside a customer business say, look, this is right for us, we need to do this. Well, they have to go out now and help convince their broader organization to take that same course of action. Organizational consensus requirements continue to go up. And there's many reasons we track as to why in our research, and we've seen as to why. Let me just give you a couple. Firstly, organizations more or less matrix today. A lot more matrixed organizations, more global organizations. There's simply put more people that have skin in the game of any decision. Secondly, there's just a little bit of what I would classify a hangover from the global recession. No single stakeholder wants to kind of stick their neck out and make a decision on behalf of their company anymore, when in fact I'd rather defer risk across my entire team, across many parts of my organization to make sure we're doing the right thing. In fact, we've gone so far as to proclaim the death of the senior decision maker. We just don't see it anymore. It's decision by committee, decision by consensus. But the third dynamic here, and I would argue perhaps the most important and impactful, is the very nature of the solutions that you take to market has changed dramatically in the past 10 years. We all take more value-added, more impactful solutions to market, but with that come implications. Implications in the form of more complexity, technology, legal, finance, all sorts of different implications because our solutions got expensive, they got risky. We all have that story. We used to sell to A, B, and C, and we still sell to A, B, and C, but we also sell to X, Y, and Z now, right? I used to sell to just HR. But now it's HR, and well, we got a technological component to our solution, so IT gets involved, and it got kind of expensive, so here comes finance. And then there they are, the sales, prevention department, legal. And we all have these stories. So how do we survive in this world where we see more and more organizational consensus requirements? Well, there's a kind of a classic playbook that we all see, and we're going to talk about that playbook here in just a minute. But what happens as we get more and more individuals involved in these purchases is the likelihood of that customer being able to drive that decision to an end state, make that decision happen, goes off a cliff. Now, for some of you, you sell and you market to SMBs, mom and pops. I love this data because one thing it shows us very clearly is the minute I move from one stakeholder to two stakeholder, things change pretty dramatically. Turns out mom and pop don't always get along, do they? And things kind of bump along there, 3, 4. Then we get out to 5 and beyond stakeholders, and things fall off another cliff. Now, for most of us in this room, where we sell and market isn't so much on the left. It's over on the right. And what our data tells us, and something we track very closely, again, we obsess over customer buying behavior at CEB, is that on average, we see 5.4 stakeholders. In fact, let me update this. This is data that is fresh in. In the past 2 years, we have seen the number of stakeholders in the average B2B purchase go up nearly 25%. Now, standing at 6.8 individuals. Now, for some of your companies, you'll scoff at that and say, Nick, it's more like 6.8 committees of people. I get that. But this is the average B2B purchase, the average, right? We're not looking at the outliers. So these consensus requirements continue to go up, and the likelihood of purchase, the likelihood of the customer doing something for their business, particularly something bold or ambitious, buying your all-singing, all-dancing solution, the likelihood of that becomes harder and harder and harder to achieve. So what's one to do? Well, the classic strategy, something I like to call track them down, win them over. Now, whether you come at this from a marketing standpoint or whether you come at this from a sales standpoint, kind of doesn't matter. The idea here is that I've got to find each one of those stakeholders. I've got to track each one of those individuals who has some say, has some authority, some influence over the deal. I've got to track them down. And once I track them down, then I got to pitch them. I got to win them over, whether that's through content or whether that's through a direct sales effort. I've got to track them down and win them over. And this is the thing that's been drilled into all of our team's heads from day one. By the way, let me be clear, for those of you who are in marketing roles, this is the reason we personalize content. Track each one down, win each one over. So let's play this story forward. Let's just pretend I'm selling a marketing automation solution. Probably a few of you in the room who actually have those solutions. 3 stakeholders I've got to engage. IT first. Maybe not first, but we'll just say it's first. Because, well, it's technology. So I got to go sit down with the CIO and first help them understand that this is actually a little bit different than CRM. But more importantly for that CIO, I've got to help them understand that my system seamlessly integrates into their legacy systems. It will cause minimal workflow disruption, and I eventually get them bought on, right? That is the value driver for them. Do no harm, seamlessly integrate. Check. Now, my solution's kind of expensive, so at some point I've got to sit down with finance. And so I'm going to focus with finance not so much on my benefits and capabilities from a marketing automation standpoint, all the reporting, all the digital aspects to my solution. No, I'm going to focus on cost efficiencies and cost savings and show them how there's solid return on investment, show them creative ways that they can reapply marketing expense in their business, and eventually get their buy-in. Check. Stakeholder 3. This is my core stakeholder, the conversation I've been waiting to have my marketer, right? The head of product marketing from some group, who knows? So I sit down with them, and I talk to them about the key benefits, the key capabilities my solution has, all the micro-segmentation they can do, the new strategies they can apply to their marketing efforts, the ways it can support digital content, and I get them bought in. So here I've got 3 stakeholders. every single one of them bought in. 1 plus 1 plus 1 should, in theory, equal 3, shouldn't it? What we're finding increasingly is that 1 plus 1 plus 1 does not equal 3. This particular strategy, track them down, win them over, is doomed to fail in many cases. Why is that? Well, let's roll tape. I want to show you some data, help substantiate this first, and then we'll tease out the implications and talk about what we can do about this. Now, what you're looking at here, it's a very simple graph, but a very profound graph. It shows us the impact on the customer making what we call a high-quality purchase, or from the vantage point of all of us in the room as suppliers, a high-quality sale. Now, what do we mean by high quality? What we mean here is not purchasing the baseline solution, not piloting or trialing our capability, but rather buying the premium version, right? The margin-enriching version of our solution. Now, oftentimes I get asked the question, Nick, what does the data look like for just a baseline purchase? It actually looks remarkably similar. But that is not the thing we are aspiring to sell. We are aspiring to sell the margin-enriching solution. So what we see here is the degree to which that track them down, win them over strategy impacts that customer's likelihood to make a high-quality purchase. So the better I access individual stakeholders, what this data shows us, the better I do that, I get a whopping, is that whopping? 4% higher likelihood? I would argue that is not whopping. It is a bit concerning. It's certainly not as high as I thought we would see that data when we first went out and did the study. As it turns out, access does matter, but what we do with that access really matters far more than just simply having the access. Now, the second data point, this is the far more concerning and troubling data point. The greater and the better I position my offering on the merits of unique value to each stakeholder, the better I do that, the lower my likelihood of closing a high-quality deal is. Content personalization must be treated very carefully. Efforts to overly tailor to individual stakeholders when you're having a sales conversation must be treated very carefully. Why do you think that chart looks that way, that graph looks that way? Why do you think that looks that way? Let's begin to unpack why it looks that way, and then let's think a little bit more about what we need to do to help customers better make decisions. Now, I love this chart because it is simple but profound. It shows us the relationship between stakeholder diversity, which you see on that bottom axis, against stakeholder dysfunction, which you see on the vertical. As stakeholder diversity goes up, so goes stakeholder dysfunction. This is a simple truth to how humans work together. Go back to the 1960s and look at theories on groupthink. Now, take a highly diverse set of stakeholders from different teams, different geos, different levels within the organization, different functions, trying to make a common purchase decision and put them together, whether in a room or virtually, I don't care, and watch how they operate. In fact, I'd go so far as to ask any one of you, think about the last purchase you made with your colleagues, or the last committee you sat on trying to make decisions. Think about how that group changed over time. Think about the dynamics that happened within that group. Did everybody get along? Was it a peachy keen, wonderful process? Would you want to do it again? This is the thing your customers are going through every single day. Now, as that diversity factor goes up, so goes dysfunction. You see dysfunction defined by those 3 boxes at the bottom. Stakeholders feeling like, my voice just wasn't heard. I don't think anybody listened to me. Secondly, stakeholders feeling like, the main issue, the big elephant in the room, we never really got to it. We didn't really put that on the table and tackle that one. And third, just having knockdown, drag-out disagreements. We couldn't get on the same page. Now, here's what's interesting. There's a bit of a silver lining. I feel like I'm sort of peddling doom and gloom up here. There's a silver lining to this. While you can't control diversity, right, it is very difficult to tell customers who can and who can't be in the buying group, who can and who can't evaluate the purchase. Very difficult to do that. I know a couple sales reps who've done it successfully. They are in the minority, I assure you. What we can control is the level of dysfunction. And there are ways to control the level of dysfunction. I'm going to go into detail around one of the ways. It is not the only way. And I would love to have further conversations with any of you on the other ways. But we're going to go into detail around one way. And it's around choosing the right stakeholders who can help quell that dysfunction inside the customer organization. But let's just get deeper and deeper into these buying dynamics, right? It's kind of like an onion, and we're peeling this thing apart here. Here's what's happening inside these buying groups, and it is imperative that we empathize with what's going on inside our customers' buying groups. Right? Think about that last purchase you made for your organization. Think about that last committee you served on. Here's what's happening inside your customer organizations every single day. Groups of diverse stakeholders with different priorities, different agendas, different metrics, different means are trying to get together and get on the same page to solve a business problem, take a common action, and buy a solution. Now, the title of this page is very telling. We call it the lowest common denominator because so often purchasing results in people just kind of giving up. What can we agree on? Fine, do it. What's really interesting, and I've got an article coming out tomorrow, in fact, in the Harvard Business Review. We talk a lot about in that article, buyer regret. 40% of all purchases end up in some form of regret. So a win isn't always a win, and this is why. Individuals aren't on the same page. And when they aren't on the same page, consensus kind of feels like, and it looks like, move cautiously. Take little risk. Proceed carefully. This isn't the receiving end of consensus we all hope to be on as suppliers. And so we've got to find a way to reverse this polarity. Now, when we think about what we were doing in that track them down, win them over strategy, inadvertently, what that strategy does is it begins to repel these stakeholders, entrenches their views. It doesn't help them arrive at a common view of the problem, let alone a common view of the action they have to take, and certainly not a common view of the supplier best able to help me. Problem, action, supplier. We've got to reverse polarity around those three ideas and help these stakeholders recognize what they have in common. Not so much on the margin what I'm trying to accomplish with this kind of thing I got signed up for to buy this one thing. I don't even care about it anymore. Let's just give up. That is not what we're looking to do. So how do we light a charge into this group? How do we reverse polarity? Well, again, we turn to our research. And as I mentioned, there's a variety of ways to reverse polarity. But the most important and the most impactful way we found wasn't so much in what we do, but who we engage inside the customer organization. We did a massive analysis of different customer profiles. Now, let me be clear before I show you the profiles where these came from. This is a massive, what we call factor analysis. We don't take research lightly at CEB. We don't dabble in hypotheticals. This is focusing on actual behaviors demonstrated by customers inside buying groups, trying to unpack how do I interact with my colleagues, with my peers in a purchase moment. Through the course of those decisions, through the course of the meetings, through the course of the emails. What you're going to see here are behaviors. Now, I'll get to in a moment various titles, senior decision makers, senior executives, and users, all that good stuff. That's just not what you're going to see. We found 7 distinct buying profiles. 7. I'll walk you through them. As I do this, I want you to think to yourself, 1, who are we trying to activate right now? Who are we trying to target with our marketing efforts? Who is our sales teams focused on of these 7? But more importantly, who really matters? Because I'm guessing some of the individuals you're currently targeting and currently engaging are in fact not the individuals who can reverse that polarity we just saw on the previous page. So let me go through these. These are kind of fun, in no particular order here. Upper left, the go-getter. The go-getter is the person who loves big ideas, but they love to take a big idea and divide it into little ideas that they can execute on. I often joke that you walk into the go-getter's office and you see the big Gantt chart pulled up, right? The Excel Gantt chart. At that moment, I shut the door. I don't want to see that Gantt chart. I know what that means, right? Lots of work for lots of people. But the go-getters get her done. Top middle, the skeptic. The skeptic might be my favorite stakeholder on here. Skeptic, again, loves big, bold ideas, but they embrace a much more conservative mindset around those ideas. They're going to push back. They're going to ask tough questions. They're going to really want to roll around in ideas before they themselves commit to that idea. Yeah? Upper right, the friend. We all love the friend. The friend's the first person to read our content, the first person to take a sales call. You want to have lunch? Hey, call up the friend. Friends are great for networking inside a company, getting to know who's who. They're good sources of information, but they're very, very vendor-friendly. Love to have conversations with us, learn what the latest offerings are, learn what we're seeing, that type of thing. Yeah? Lower left, the teacher. The teacher we probably should have called the visionary. I think in many ways at CEB we were kind of inspired by different teachers that we've had through the course of education. So we called this person the teacher, but really this is the visionary. This is the person that grabs the whiteboard marker, goes up and draws the big idea on the whiteboard, tries to rally the troops behind that big idea. What showed up in our data, and this is really quite interesting, it also gives you a sense of how deep we go with the data. What we found was that teachers oftentimes are pulled into meetings with senior executives who are looking for that source of inspiration from the business. Many times they're more junior folks, brought in intentionally to kind of stir the pot. The guide, the guide's kind of the sleazy one. The guide's sort of like the tabloid magazine inside the customer organization. I'll never forget it. One time I was on a sales call with one of our sales team members, and I sat down with a guide. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Now, Nick, I know you're meeting with Bob down the hall. And Bob doesn't know this yet, but in 2 weeks' time, Bob's job is out the window." Why'd you just tell me that? Feels almost unethical at some level, but guides use information as a source of power and influence. Okay? Climber. We all know the climber. The climber tries to buy things to create projects that become kind of a platform for them to elevate their own career. Right? By doing busy work, by buying these things, by creating these projects, I'm elevating my career, I'm gunning for the next promotion. I have a lot of self-motivation. I'm sort of the with them, right? What's in it for me person. And finally, lower right, the blocker. And I will give you this one. The blocker is not the right stakeholder to pursue. The blocker isn't so much that they're against you and your solution as they're against changing the status quo. Okay? Blockers are, the common objection you'll hear from a blocker is, we are in execution mode, don't have time for this, don't have time for that disruption. Okay? So those are the 7 stakeholders. Now here's a clue about which ones win and which ones lose. 3 of these profiles outperform the other 3. Okay? So 3 winners, 3 losers. The blocker, take them off the list. Got it in your mind who you think wins? Got it in your mind who you're targeting right now and who your sales teams are talking to? Here's how the data plays out. Go-getters, teachers, skeptics dramatically outperform the other 3 profiles. These individuals are far more likely, far more able, far more willing, have the political savviness to drive change in their organization, right? These aren't the iron-fisted rulers telling people to change. These are the ones who have that savvy understanding of how to make things happen, how to convince others. Collectively, we call these 3 the mobilizers because they do just that. They are mobilizers. Now, lest you think this is a classic advocate, classic coach, classic champion we all learned back when we took sales training way back when. These individuals are not that profile. These individuals are deeply supplier agnostic, and that shows up all over the data. They do not care if you win the business. They do not care about your solution. They care about doing the right thing for their business and driving those ideas into the business. If you just happen to be able to support that idea, all the better. They do not want to have sales calls. When you have a sales call with them and sit down with them, here's how the sales pitch goes, right? I'm the sales rep. I've got my nice new glossy from my marketing team. I go sit down with the mobilizer. I walk them through my big, bold idea for their business. And what's the mobilizer do? Do they love it? No. They push back. They ask tough questions. And as a kind of everyday average sales rep, what do I do in that moment? I kind of freak out. Let's just, you know what, let's not even worry about this. Let's just tell me, Joe, how are your kids doing? How'd T-ball end up? Change the topic altogether. I go back, sit down with my marketer, throw the glossy back in their face and say they hated it. They hated it. Give me my old spec sheets back. I'm not going to go show them new ideas for their business ever again. Tough questions. They didn't like it. All the while, the mobilizer's trying to understand, is this a good idea for my business? How does this apply to my business? What can I do with this? Walking the gauntlet is really what that is for the average sales rep. And as you create content that helps those reps, know it's going to go under that scrutiny with mobilizers. But this is what they need. They need big ideas to take to the business. However, talkers on the right, we find these folks love them some vendors. Happy to meet with vendors. Happy to take your pitch decks. Happy to take your glossies and shop them around the organization. And as a result, very little happens. These individuals lack the credibility. Oftentimes their peers and colleagues know exactly what this person's doing with their alternate agenda, their little power play, and individuals don't respond to talkers terribly well. Not surprisingly, blockers on the far right there. So what do we do? How do we engage these mobilizers? What do we have to kind of feed them, to fuel that fire, get them motivating inside the customer organization, get them challenging their peers to think differently? We're going to go through this quickly here. First, I got to make sure I'm identifying the right individuals. Feel free to take a picture of this flow chart. It's going to be in the decks for you guys. It's all available for you after this session. I'm not going to go through the gory details of this. As marketers in the room, ensure that you are engaging a mobilizer. By the way, good content, not only can it shake loose a mobilizer from a customer organization, in many cases it can create a mobilizer. We talk about that extensively inside the Challenger Customer Book. But I've got to make sure I'm using the right content to do that. And you see that first white box on the far left. Lead with a thought-provoking insight. And what I'm looking for here is a certain amount of healthy skepticism. I want that. Now, there's one other test on here. Like I said, I'm not going to go through the gory details of this because I'm going to run up on time. There's one other test on here to make sure you've got a mobilizer. In fact, it's not on the page. It's kind of box number 4. I just didn't have enough room there. Give them homework. Make sure your sales teams give them homework. Complete this diagnostic. Get me this data. Set up this meeting. If they can't deliver those things, you have not got a mobilizer on your hand. Give them homework. So what do I do now that I've found a mobilizer? I think I found them. Let's make sure we're engaging them with the right message, the right collateral, the right content that they can continue to bring back to their organization to help drive a new idea. It's a bit of a riddle. What's the one thing every single company in this room sells? Not value-added solutions. That's only 64.2% of you. Change. Every single one of us sells some form, some factor, some flavor of change. Stop doing this, start doing that. Stop buying from them, start buying from us. Right? Stop doing things this way, add this particular capability. Every single one of our companies sells change. What's the number one thing customers don't want to do? Change. And so here we are. So we have to ensure we're creating compelling visions, compelling ideas to help customers change. In fact, we've gone out and we've tested a variety of different content forms and the attributes of content that help spark change. Help customers change their direction. Stop doing this, start doing that. Now, a lot of these attributes are kind of core to what we create in marketing roles, right? So let's just look across this chart here. Being accessible, easy to find. Containing interesting facts or factoids, interesting anecdotes. Did you know 89% of CIOs care about cloud computing? Didn't know it was 89%. I knew it was a lot. Being easy to understand. Representing a smart perspective. And I pause on that one because this is the one that most of us are guilty of. In the name of thought leadership, we are trying to simply say smart things. The thought is by looking smart, customers will associate our smart points of view with wanting to buy our products. Turns out they really don't. What we found are all these attributes, and this is a very rigorous analysis of content. All these attributes, while they are in fact table stakes, it's not to say they're not important, they don't actually change a customer's mind. The two aspects that do are providing them compelling reasons to take action. I have to show them the things they've missed, the opportunities they missed, the costs that they haven't fully understood, the risks that they haven't fully mitigated. I have to create that occasion firstly. Secondly, I have to, and this is where it becomes imperative, particularly for this mobilizer customer, I have to teach you something new about your business. I have to show the customer a new way forward. Now, the way that we think about this is a very, very simple framework. We call it the A to B. A to B is nothing more than A state, the customer's current beliefs, their current behavior. And the B state is the desired beliefs and behavior we want them to have. Now, ask yourself a very simple rhetorical question here. Where does the majority of our content focus? On the A or on the B? Let's be honest with ourselves here. It's on the B. Look how good the world can be doing business with us. Look at the ROI on our products. Look at the capabilities. You want to be doing this. And the customers will say, yeah, actually, that looks pretty good. I wonder what's for lunch. We haven't gotten the customer to change their behavior, to understand the implications of what they're currently doing and how that's costing them in ways they can't possibly appreciate right now. We must break down the A. And I would challenge every single one of you in this room as you're creating content, as your sales teams are out there engaging in customers, make the conversation all about the A. This is what that mobilizer customer needs. This is what your challenger customer needs to go in and effectively challenge how their organization thinks. You've got to arm them with that A. I'd love to go on for more and more time here. Fortunately, I've only got 30 minutes, so we're going to wrap things up here. But let me leave you with this thought. I want to make sure that we understand the importance of speaking to the customer in their terms, challenging how they think about their business, instigating and helping those mobilizers drive the big ideas they want to drive into the business. And if we're doing that with our content, with our sales efforts, we will in fact be growing. With that, thank you very much. Cheers, everyone.